So now we're up to the Beis HaLevi. And here in Yevamot Daf Dalet and Beis, one of the most profound issues on this daf is the question of Mochrei Ksus. Rashi seems to assume that Mochrei Ksus are allowed to wear shatnez because they don't have kavana to enjoy the benefit of the b'gadim. And Rashi seems to be invoking the principle of Davar She'eino Miskaven. But that principle, as the Gemara establishes in Psachim Chafei and Beis, is a matter of a great debate between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Does Rashi therefore imply that our sugya here that assumes that Mochrei Ksus are not violating the Isur Kilayim is a reflection of the Shita of Rabbi Shimon, Davar She'eino Miskaven Mutar, and Rabbi Yehuda would reject it. And the Achronim point out, and even the Rishonim point out already, that this sugya that we're learning is Rabbi Yehuda. I mean, we're trying to establish that Rabbi Yehuda is the one who, although he rejects Smuchim in Kol Tarkuli, accepts Smuchim in Mishnah Torah. And Rabbi Yehuda holds Davar She'eino Miskaven is also. So the one who wants to come to the defense of Rashi is none other than the Beis HaLevi, because the Ramban objects to Rashi and completely rejects Rashi and offers an alternative interpretation of this Gemara, this sugya, and he's assuming that what's going on here is during Yemos HaChama, and you get absolutely no benefit from wearing a beged on top of his regular garments during Yemos HaChama. And the question is, did the Torah prohibit a levisha she'ein bo hanon? Says the Beis HaLevi, let's learn a Gemara in Beitza on Daf Lamed Beis. The Gemara speaks about preparing a campfire, a madura, on Yontif. On Yontif. Now, the problem with this madora is not meleches havara, which is certainly a classic meleches ochel nefesh, that would be mutar on Yontif, but rather meleches binyan. What's binyan? So the Gemara says, shehamadura bnuya mimachitzel shel eitzim v'aleim koro shel eitzim. In other words, what he does is, in order to create this campfire, he makes a kind of a pyramid. And he sets down on the lower part of the ground larger logs, and then on top, smaller and smaller logs until he gets to the top. And that's called a tsuras b'niya milamata klapi malo. We're talking about a whole different issue now. We're not talking about meleches machsheves or meleches ochel nefesh. We're talking about a melacha that's completely prohibited on Yontif. It's not a meleches ochel nefesh to set up this fire, and he's structuring the logs in a way that it's tzuras habniya, and there's an iser of what we call asiyas oel b'Yontif, which is a tolda of meleches bonet. And it's not in meleches ochel nefesh. So Rashi tells us in Masechet Beitza an unbelievable chiddush that this prohibition of hachanas midora b'Yontif is only according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that Davar She'eino Miskaven is also. But according to Rabbi Shimon, who's matir Davar She'eino Miskaven, creating this madora on Yontif is perfectly okay. Because he's not miskaven to create an oil. He needs to create a madora. He needs a flame and a campfire. He's not building an oil. Oil is something that you go into and you benefit from the airspace inside the oil. You create a structure with a roof and so forth. That doesn't interest him at all. And therefore it's a Davar She'eino Miskaven. Very difficult Rashi. Tosus says, what are you talking about? That's a davar she'eino miskamin? Davar she'eino miskamin means that you're dragging a kisei or a safsel and you're making charitza. That's a davar she'eino miskamin. He meant to do A and he did B. Here he has full-fledged intention to create this madora bitzuras b'niya b'lamala lamata. At best, what Rashi could have invoked is the principle of malacha she'ena tzricha legufa, which means that I had in mind to dig a hole, but I don't want the hole, I want the dirt. He doesn't need the guma, he has no intention of planting in this hole. That's how meleches charisha, because it's a davar malacha she'ena tzricha legufa here too. All right, he's building a tzuras b'niya, but for what purpose? What motivates him? What's his ultimate agenda, his goal? It's not to live inside the OL. Do you follow what Tosfos' objective is? Malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. Hareyu miskaven l'tzura shel OL. That's not his agenda and his purpose. Mishum she'enu amur l'shtamish bo ke'ohel. Right? He's not going inside of this oil. He's using it as a madora. V'imkeina enu inyan l'machlokas b'davar she'enu miskaven. Elahu toli b'machlokas l'inyan malacha she'enu tzricha l'gufa. You chayav from malacha she'enu tzricha l'gufa, or are you not? And that's a machlokas again, Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda, but it has nothing to do with davar she'enu miskaven. Rashi made a big boo-boo here, says Tosfos, by invoking the machlokas Reb Yehuda, Reb Shimon about davar she'enu miskaven. This is not a davar she'enu miskaven; it's a davar miskaven. So we end up with two different kashas, two different objections to Rashi. One is Rashi here in Mochrik Sus, that he pins it on a davar she'enu miskaven, which is machlokas Reb Yehuda Reb Shimon, and the Rashi in Beitza who says that the issue of creating this mador b'tzuras oel is a machlokas between Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon about davar she'enu miskaven, because his kavanah is not to create an oil. And Tosfos says, what do you mean? He has full-fledged kavanah to create an oil, albeit for a different purpose, not for the purpose of enjoying it as an oil, but for the purpose of mador. Now, the Beis Halevi points out that Tosfos is not out in the clear. He also is an explicit kasha, a head-on objection that we have to raise against Tosfos. And that's based on the Gemara of Pesachim. The Gemara by Mochrik Sus says that Mochrik Sus is, and that Mishnah that's matir is Rabbi Shimon. But Rabbi Yehuda would ask it because davar she'enu miskaven is awesome. Well, what do you mean? Even if he's not miskaven for noas chimum, he definitely has kavanah for levisha. Again, davar she'enu miskaven is really, I don't want to say this because it's a little bit misleading, but just it's a little bit helpful to say this. It's an expression or a manifestation of what we call misasik. Misasik means I'm involved in one pu'ula and a second pu'ula turns out, happens. I'm rolling my body on the ground, and guess what? I rolled over Kalim and I destroyed Kalim. That's Kisei V'Safsol of Rav Shimon. It's very similar to Misasik. But you can't tell me that Mochrik Sus is Misasik. You can't tell me that Mochrik Sus is not interested in Levisha. He is interested in Levisha. Again, why? That's a different problem. Call that why? When you ask why, what motivates you, what's your goal and your agenda, that's malach she'eino tzricha legufa. When you're asking, did he have kavanah? Did he intend to do what he did? Or did something else happen, misgalgel? That's a davar she'eino miskaven. So Tosfos is right for objecting to Rashi in the case where he made a Madora and he had full-fledged intention and awareness that he's creating an oil. But ask the question, for what purpose? Is he going to enjoy the oil or not? No, he's just making a bonfire. That's Malach Shein Tzricha L'Gufa. Say the same thing with regard to Mochei Ksus. Did he have kavanah to wear the kilayim? Absolutely. There was no fooling around him. No one pulled the wool over his eyes and said, well, you know what? As you're doing X, Y happened. So you made charitzim in the ground. That's not what we're dealing with. He knows 100% that he's wearing kilayim. Of us, he has a different motivation. He's not interested in kilayim. That's not a davar she'eino miskabel. He knows full well and with full intention he's wearing kilayim. But you ask him for what purpose, he needs this levisha for a different purpose, not the classic purpose of warming your body, but rather transporting it for the sake of his body. And yet the Gemara says explicitly in Psachim that Mochei Ksus, whether or not they could carry wear their kilayim is dependent upon the Machlokes Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda about davar she'eino miskabel. How's Tosfos going to explain that? And this question becomes even more difficult when you think about the fact that there is no such thing as a category called Malach Shein Tzricha L'Gufa outside of the bounds of Shabbos. You're talking about the Isser of Levishas Kilayim. There's no such thing as a Malach Shein Tzricha L'Gufa. Why are you wearing the begging? Are you motivated by the classic desire to protect and warm your body, or for a different reason? Those kind of questions are irrelevant to Kol Torah. They're only relevant in Shabbos because Meleches Machshavas Asur Torah. Even Rab Shimon, who patents Malach Shein Tzricha L'Gufa, that's only in Shabbos, not in any other Isur. Says the Beis Halevi, Vaistois, Mizeh Muchach, very brisk language, Mizeh Muchach, what we have to conclude here, we've got to change something in our assumptions. Ein Geder Isur Kilayim Bi Etzem HaLevisha. The Levisha itself is not the Isur. But rather the Isur is the Hana. The classic approach, before the Beis Halevi, we have two historical periods. We'll call it historical period Roman numeral number 1. That's before the Beis Halevi. We believed that the Isur is Levisha, and the T'nai is that you benefit from the Levisha. Then, says the Beis Halevi, the Isur is not the Maisa Levisha. The Isur is the Hana that you get from the Levisha. The Hana that you get from Levisha is not a T'nai in the Isur, but rather Gufa Isur. That defines the very essence of the Isur. And when I learned this Beis Halevi, I always think of the fact that Reb Chaim had a certain innate repulsion or rejection of philosophical language and analysis. There was a fellow here who was the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. His name was Rav Amiel. He wrote a book, 3 volumes, Amidot L'Cheker Halacha. And a lot of it tells her it's a lot of philosophical terminology. Like, is this part of the essence, or is it only secondary or accidental? I mean, all those terminologies that come from the world of secular philosophy, Rav Amiel has no problem applying them to halacha. And Rav Chaim he would never use that terminology. But here, although it's not the terminology, but it's essentially a philosophical analysis, classic in the logic of philosophy. And as Chatoyni Maskir, I took philosophy as a major in undergraduate school, and I got my master's in philosophy. And a lot of philosophy is about this distinction between accidental conditions and essential conditions. which in Hebrew translates as etzem versus mikra, or etzem versus t'nai. And that's what the Beis Halevi is talking about. Don't fool yourself. He's using that identical structure, that methodology. He's saying that the essence of the Iser Kilayim is not what you think it is. It's not the Maisa Levisha. It's the Hana that you get from Levisha. Don't think that Hana in the Iser Kilayim plays a secondary role as a condition. It's not a condition. It's the Gufa Iser, the essence of the Iser. Therefore, Kol she'einu miskaven la'ana, if he's not interested in ana, harei zeh ke'einu miskaven le'etzem ha'is, le'etzem ma'isa ha'is. That's why, by the way, Reb Chaim is of the opinion that if you daven without kavanah, you're a misasek, because Reb Chaim understood that tefillah is not just getting up and mumbling words. Tefillah is kavanah. Kavanah is the essence of the Maaseh tefillah. And in the absence of kavanah, you're a misasek. You're not even involved in a Maaseh tefillah. And the Beis Halevi, using a similar structure, would say that if you were to wear kilayim, but you're not interested in hana, and there's no hana element here, then you're a misasek. You're not involved in the Maaseh Aveira at all. There's no Maaseh Iser. The Maaseh Iser is not putting on the beged. It's hana and abeg. That is the essence of the Iser. Now let's see how we can apply this to answer and defend Rashi from the kashas of the Rishon. If not for the pasuk lo silbash, we would have assumed that the Iser Kilayim is the etzem halavish, and the hana, the benefit is only a tanah. And a tanai means that you don't violate the Iser levisha unless that levisha will bring you to a state of hana. According to that understanding, there would be an Iser of mochei ksus, even according to Rav Shimon. Why? Because as the Rishonim object to Rashi, he has kavanah for levisha. He has kavanah for the Maaseh Aveira. Even Rav Shimon would agree that in such a case there's no p'tur, there's no matir in Tov Shein Mitzvah. Why? Says the Beis Halevi, because if you are lacking in kavanah for the t'nai of the Iser, that's not eino miskaven. Eino miskaven means that you don't have kavanah for the essence of the Iser. And if the essence of the Iser is the levisha, then mochei ksus is not a dover sheina miskaven, pardon the double negative. He has kavanah. He has kavanah for the Maaseh Aveira of Maaseh Levisha's Kilayim. So therefore the Torah says lo silbash. And by telling us lo silbash, the Torah is revealing a new definition of the Iser of Kilayim. It's telling me that the Iser of Kilayim is the hana itself. And if he doesn't have kavanah for the hana, then we have a davar sheina miskaven, and we're back to Rav Shimon. And Rashi is correct that our sugya reflects the shita of Rav Shimon, which means that a davar sheina miskaven is mutter. Again, we're not out in the clear yet, because we still have to square with Rabbi Yehuda insofar as our sugya of smuchin b'mishnah Torah is Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, "Chasav Rachmana lo silba shatnes, dumya de levisha de ispei hana." So the Iser of Kilayim, says the Beis Halevi, is the hana, which is fine, except for one problem. And that is mitzvos lav lehenosne. If the Isser Kalayim is Hana, and he's wearing the Kalayim for tzitzis, then we should apply the principle of mitzvah lav lehenos nid. And there is no Hana. Like, for example, a man takes a neder that he won't have Hana from a shofar. He's allowed to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah because mitzvah lav lehenos nid. The benefit that he gets from the shofar, namely the kiyum mitzvah shofar, is not considered Hana. He hasn't violated the Isser Hana of neder, that he took a neder that he won't be neder from the shofar. So what is this whole sugya about? Kilayim b'tzitzis. What do you mean? Kilayim b'tzitzis should be aser? What? Because the iser of Levishas kilayim is hana. If that be the case, then he's being mekayim the mitzvah. When he wears this beged, he is fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis, and we should activate the principle of mitzvahs lav lehenos. There's only one problem, or perhaps one attractive solution to this passion about why Kilayim b'tzitzis is an issue in the light of the principle of mitzvah slav lehenos, and if we assume and identify the Isser Kilayim as an Isser Hana. But I could say that mitzvah slav lehenos means when the mitzvah itself is related to the Hana. If there's a relationship between the Hana and the mitzvah, then I can say that this Hana that he's getting from this action, this involvement, is a result of the mitzvah. I can relate it to the mitzvah because the mitzvah is the Hana. But in the case of tzitzis, it's hard to say, it's impossible to say that the essence of the mitzvah of tzitzis is the hana. For this, we have a Rashba in Dorim, apparently very famous, that the Beis Halevi quotes, and it's on Daf Tesvavam in Beis. The Rashba holds that mitzvah lav lehenos nidnu applies not just if the hana is related to the mitzvah itself, but even any hana that he gets from the ma'aseh mitzvah. If the ma'aseh mitzvah is wearing the beged of tzitzis and he gets hana because it warms his body, then we're going to apply the principle of mitzvah lav lehenos. And there's no isur and isur. So in the case of Kilayim b'tzitzis, clearly according to the Rashba, there would be no violation of the Isur Kilayim, because the Isur Kilayim fundamentally is an Isur, essentially is an Isur Hana. And if through this Levishi is being Mekayim a mitzvah, then the Hana that he gets from the Levisha is not considered Hana. That's called Lav Lehenos. So now we're ready for Akasha. So why do we need smichus, smuchin, to derive the heter of tzitzis b'kalayim? Why not just simply apply the principle of mitzvah lav lehenos? Says the Beis Halevi. L'chora, we're in a paradoxical situation because the only way of answering this kasha about why the parsha, the smichus of the line of tzitzis is necessary in the light of the principle of mitzvah slav lehenos, that would only make sense if we define the Isur Kilayim as the Maisa Levish. then we could say that we don't apply mitzvah slav lehenos unless the Isur itself is the Hana. If the Isur is the Maisa Isur, and Hana is only a Tanai, then the Hana of the Maisa Mitzvah is also considered a Kiyum Atna. So just like you're saying that the Ikar of the Lav is the Maisa Levisha, and the Hana is a Tanai, then even in the case of a Maisa Mitzvah, the Hana from the Maisa Mitzvah is a Kiyum Atna. We're really in a bind because the thrust of the Beis Halevi's answer to defend Rashi about why Mochrei Ksus is considered Davar She'eino Miskamin was because the Hana defines the essence of the Isur. And if the Hana defines the essence of the Isur, now we're left with the problem of Mitzvah Slav Lehenos. And now the Beis Halevi is saying that to resolve that problem, Mitzvah Slav Lehenos, so we have to take the opposite definition, and we're going to define Kilayim as an Isur Maisa Levich, and Hana it's just secondary, it's a Tanai. And with regard to Hana, which is a Tanai, we don't apply the principle of Mitzvahs Lav Lehenos. So in effect, the Beis Halevi is answering one kasha, but his answer is antithetical to the answer that he himself gave to another kasha. So in order to answer this, the Beis Halevi really goes out on a limb, and he claims that the whole kasha makes no sense. It doesn't get off the ground. It's Slav Lehenos was not applicable. Why? The Isur Kilayim Hu ala Beged Kula. The entire Beged from one end to the other is Asur B'Kilayim. Masha Enkin, the mitzvah of tzitzis, Eino Miskayemis Ela B'Chutei HaTzitzis Sheva Beged. And therefore, Ein Lahatim Mishum Mitzvah Slav Lehenos to do Ela Es Chutei HaTzitzis B'Beged V'lo Es Kol HaBeged. And basically, at this point, the Beis Halevi is going back to his definition that the Isur Kilayim is the Hana, and we really should have applied Mitzvah Slav Lehenos. We cannot do so because the Isur is on the entire Beged, whereas the Mitzvah is only on the Chutei HaTzitzis. You see, I always wondered, we have a principle called Hidur Mitzvah, Zekei Levan. Would Hidur Mitzvah apply to a talis? You know, I don't have to tell you, some people they come up with artistic, beautiful talis, and they'll put an atara. As Chatayim Maskir, when I got married, I asked my shver, Old Shalom, for a talis with an atara on. I didn't get one of these really fancy ataras. It wasn't a big show-off kind. I had four rows of those silver, things. And in my mind, that was a great kiyum of Zekeli Mamdeli. But if you ask me today, I'm not sure. Again, I don't want to be an apikoris here and go against the minhag. Everybody gets the most beautiful talesim. But I don't know if the talis is a chefetz shel mitzvah. The mitzvah is in the chutei tzitzis. Kilayim, says the Beis Halevi, is on the entire beged. If there was hidur mitzvah for an avera, it would be a hidur avera to have kilayim in a beautiful beged. But if you talk about the mitzvah tzitzis, the mitzvah tzitzis is focused and is concentrated, according to Beis Halevi, on the chutei tzitzis. Get the most beautiful chutei tzitzis that you can have. But the beged itself, I don't know if it's a chefetz shel mitzvah. Now, I want to think out loud with you about the kasha that we asked on Tosfos. Tosfos in the Sugya Beitza objects to Rashi because Rashi invokes the principle of Eino Miskaven. He has no kavana to create a tzuras olam. And Tosfos says that's not true. When he builds his Madura, he intentionally builds it with a tzuras olam. Narvas, it's a malach sheni shrifel guf. So then how can Mochrik Sus be dependent, according to Tosfos, on the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon in Davar Sheni Miskaven? According to Tosfos, this is clearly a Davar Miskaven, because Mochrik Sus, he has full intention to wear the beged. The answer is going to be the Beis Halev. That the Avera is not the wearing of the beged, but the Hana that he gets from wearing the beged. That's the essence of the Isur. And if that be the case, then in Mochrik Sus, he doesn't have kavana for the Ma'aseh Avera. If the Ma'aseh Avera is identified as the Hana, he didn't have any intention of having that. And it depends, therefore, on the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. And now to finish up this discussion, okay, I see. I didn't realize what time it is. So let me just make a note of where we got up to.